The storm came without warning, tearing through the sky like a wound ripped open by the gods. Lightning cracked over the hills, rain fell in sheets, and the river swelled until it licked the edges of the village. Trees bowed. Chickens flew from their cages. Mothers clutched their children indoors, praying the wind would not carry their roofs away. When morning came, silence fell heavy over the mud-slicked earth. The village of Lumbala blinked through broken fences and flooded fields. Crops were flattened. A few huts were half submerged. But what the villagers remembered most wasn't the destruction. It was the girl. She stood at the edge of the riverbank, barefoot, soaked, and silent. Her skin was the shade of river clay. Her eyes, no one could quite describe them. Some said they were silver like the moon on water. Others said they were the deep blue of old sorrow. All agreed, her gaze was not of this world. She wore a dress too fine for a child of the flood. Woven with patterns older than anyone recognized, it clung to her thin frame like a second skin. Her hair, long and dark, hung in thick ropes down her back, and her hands were calloused in a way that suggested both survival and silence. When the village chief approached her, she said nothing. When the healer asked her name, she did not speak. When the old widow tried to feed her porridge, she accepted with a nod but no word. She never asked for help, never cried, never laughed. They began calling her, the girl with no name. At first they pitied her. They assumed she had lost her family to the storm. The chief offered her a mat in the common hut. The healer checked her for wounds. But the days passed and her silence grew heavier. Animals avoided her. Babies cried when she passed. At night, some swore they heard the river whisper her name, though no one knew what it was. The village children stayed away. When she came to the market, the stalls grew quiet. Traders pretended to be busy with their wares. The women started murmuring that the storm had brought her, that she was not meant to survive, that no one could lose so much and remain that still. Only one person defended her, Magina, the old widow who had fed her that first morning. She's just a girl, Magina insisted. Quiet ones carry heavy things. Leave her be. But fear is a seed that needs only a whisper to grow roots. And the whispers came, louder with each passing moon. Chickens stopped laying. A child fell ill. A boat overturned on the river with no wind at all. She cursed the village, someone said. She speaks to the water, another whispered. One night the well turned black. No explanation, no reason. Just dark, undrinkable water where there had once been sweet spring. The elders met under the fig tree. The chief tried to reason. She has done nothing, he said. She is only a girl. But reason does not feed fear. And the river, they claimed, would not be angry without cause. They came for her at dawn. 20 men, faces tight with fear, women behind them clutching charms. They dragged her from Magina's hut while the old woman screamed and wept. The girl did not struggle. She walked barefoot over thorns and stone, her gaze calm, her lips sealed. Even as they tied her hands with vine. Even as they led her toward the river's edge. The sky was clear that morning. The birds silent. The water glistened, high and waiting. They shoved her in. She sank without a sound. They watched the bubbles rise. And then, she did not drown. The river held her. She floated, eyes open, arms out, vines unraveling around her wrists. The water swirled, but she did not flail. She rose slowly, like a leaf caught in a breath. Her feet touched nothing. Her body drifted just above the current, upheld by something no eye could see. A wind rose, though the trees did not move. The village gasped as the water around her began to glow. Pale blue. Bright silver. Her eyes, too, shimmered with that unearthly light. She spoke her first words. You called me a curse, she said. Her voice was neither angry nor loud, but it rippled through the bones of every man, woman, and child present. But I came to protect you. The river behind her roared. Before the storm I dreamed of fire. I saw the sky break and the earth open. I followed the dream to your banks. I thought I would find welcome. Instead I found fear. The villagers fell to their knees. A child cried out, I'm sorry. She looked toward the boy and smiled. I am not here for vengeance, she said. Only for truth. She lifted her hands. From the water rose images, not clear, not like mirrors, but shadows of what had been. The villagers saw themselves. Turning away. Throwing stones. Whispering hate. And they wept. You are not wicked, she said. You are frightened. But fear must not choose your actions. The river quieted. I came with no name so you would see me. Not as clan. Not as ghost. But as girl. And then she began to sink again, not drowning but descending. as if the river were welcoming her home. "Wait!" cried Magina, stumbling forward. "Please?" The girl turned once more. She smiled. "Magina," she said gently. "You gave me a name. You saw me first." "What was your name, child?" the old woman cried. "I have many. But the river calls me Isa." And then she was gone. The water closed without a ripple. The villagers stood in silence, the weight of their shame thick as the morning mist. That night, the river glowed once more, faint and pulsing. By dawn the well had cleared. The sick child began to recover. The chickens laid again. No one spoke of what they had done, not for weeks. But Magina began carving a stone by the riverbank. Just one word. Asa. The children asked and she told them. Told them of a girl with no name, who floated when she should have sunk. Who forgave when she should have cursed. Who left behind not wrath, but light. Now, when storms come, the villagers light lanterns by the water's edge. They hum lullabies in case Isa passes near. And they teach their children. Sometimes what you fear is the very thing sent to save you. The winds came strangely that season, dry one moment, soaked with sea brine the next, curling around huts and rattling the bones of trees. Whispers moved with the breeze, not just the rustling of leaves or the clatter of loose thatch, but true whispers, the kind that felt human but had no face behind them. The villagers tried to ignore it at first. After all, winds came and went in Mabila, and strange things often accompanied them. But this time something was different. This time the wind seemed to speak. The girl with no name had stayed quiet since her arrival, sitting at the edge of the village near the riverbank where she first appeared. She built no hut, asked for nothing and responded to no questions. She merely watched, her deep-water eyes reflecting more than sunlight. Sometimes they held the storm that birthed her. People brought her food at first out of courtesy, perhaps guilt, but over time, those acts of kindness thinned like smoke in the rain. It began with the children. One by one they started coughing, their energy fading like leaves in drought. Healers tried their best, burning herbs, chanting prayers, rubbing roots into their skin, but no cure stayed the illness. The mothers sat up all night, rocking sick children, whispering to ancestors, begging for mercy. Then came the blight. A strange color touched the edges of the crops, something between gray and blue, like rot and frost combined. The maize curled before it ripened. Beans fell from their stems unopened. By the time the third moon rose, fear walked openly in the streets. The whispers turned to blame. They started soft, behind doors and between breaths. She came with the storm. Her eyes never blink. The river never truly accepted her. Then louder. Ever since she arrived, we've known no peace. Some villagers stopped walking near the river altogether. Children were told not to go near her, though some still did, pulled by strange dreams they didn't understand. An elder, Induka, remembered tales his own grandmother used to tell. Stories of river spirits who took human form to test villages. If mistreated, they cursed the land. If honored, they gifted it. He tried to remind others of this possibility, but his words were drowned beneath louder voices. She is no spirit. She's a curse, a merchant shouted during the gathering. We welcomed her, and look what has become of us. One woman, Mama Ife, stood up then, her hands wrinkled but firm. We gave her crumbs and called it kindness. And now we blame her for the rats. But few listened. The hunger made them bitter. The illness made them desperate. The girl remained unmoved. Even when a group of young men hurled insults at her one afternoon, calling her river witch and storm ghost, she only stared. Her silence, once mysterious, now felt threatening. And the whispers in the wind grew clearer. They said they saw her talking to shadows. My son said she stands in the river at night and never sinks. Something unnatural guards her. That last whisper was not from a human mouth. It came through the wind, curling through the huts at midnight. The villagers awoke screaming, some swearing they had heard a voice like thunder say, "She is not yours to judge." But instead of heeding the warning, fear hardened into cruelty. When a respected elder's grandchild died despite all healing efforts, the village broke. Grief became a storm stronger than the one that had brought her. She brought this ruin, someone yelled at dawn and others agreed. Torches were lit. A drum was beaten, not in celebration or mourning but in decision. The girl was to be cast out, no, not just cast out. She was to be returned to the river. Let the place she came from take her back. When they came for her, she did not run. She did not cry. She stood, barefoot on the wet earth, eyes calm as a still pool. They tied her wrists loosely, no one wanted to touch her too long. Even the ropes felt uneasy. They led her down to the river where her journey had begun. The wind howled again. Trees bent. A strange mist rose from the water. Some paused, feeling something old awaken in the soil. Mama Ife begged them to stop, but the crowd pushed forward. Fear had given them false courage. "It's her or us," someone shouted, and the rope was tugged. The girl stepped into the river without resistance. The last thing she did was look up, not at the villagers but at the sky. Her lips moved, silent, but the wind carried something away. Words the villagers could not understand. And then she was gone beneath the surface. Or so they thought. Because the river did not churn. It did not foam. It did not drown. Instead it sang. The sun did not rise the morning after she walked into the river. Or at least that's how it felt. A pale gray hung in the sky like smoke, and the usual birdsong that greeted dawn was missing. People whispered less and stared more. A silence had settled over the village, thicker than any fog, pressing against skin and thoughts alike. Though no body was found, many believed the river had taken her. Yet there was no relief. The sickness in children did not lift. The crops did not green. The cows still cried in the night, and one was found dead near the grove with eyes wide in terror. Whatever curse they believed they had banished remained, perhaps deeper now, coiled, watching. The chief called a council. His hut filled quickly, each elder sitting with heavy shoulders and wary eyes. The fire in the center crackled low. They spoke of omens and dreams, of ancient punishments and forgotten rites. But fear had stolen reason from their minds. They didn't speak of what they had done. They only spoke of what still haunted them. The chief remained quiet until all had spoken. His advisor, Euro, an older man with a sharp voice and shifty eyes, rose slowly. "It is not enough," he said. "She did not drown. The river may have spared her, but we must not. We must offer her properly." A murmur passed through the hut. "But she's gone," said one woman. "We watched her disappear." Euro shook his head. "Disappearance is not death. She walked in and the river did not claim her. That is no mortal girl. That is a spirit, and we insulted the old gods by trying to do their work. Now they wait watching. We must make it right. We must do it again, this time completely." The chief looked uneasy, but the fear in the room thickened until he could not breathe without it. He gave a slow nod. "We will find her. Tonight." They moved like shadows through the village, torches covered to dim the flames. They searched near the river, in the grove, even at the edge of the forbidden hills. Just before the stars reached their peak, a boy shouted. He had seen movement behind the healer's hut. There, crouched beneath a thick mat of leaves, was the girl. Dirt streaked her arms, her dress torn. She did not struggle. She only looked up, her eyes filled with something that made even the bravest man hesitate. Still they seized her. They did not use rope this time. Euro ordered vines from the forest, ones used in binding sacred trees, the kind that were said to hold spirits fast. They wrapped her wrists and ankles, then looped the vines around her neck, not tight enough to choke her, but enough to make her stumble when she walked. She said nothing as they led her through the sleeping village. Only the soft rustling of feet and the occasional crack of a branch marked their passage. The moon, full and watching, seemed to cast judgment on them all. Some villagers stayed hidden behind doors, pretending they didn't hear. Others peeked through cracks, holding their breath. One mother wept silently as the girl passed. Her own child lay sick with fever inside, and she dared not speak a word. The river shimmered in the distance, black as oil. Mist hung over it like breath on glass. As they neared the bank, the girl suddenly paused. Her feet dug into the earth. The guards pulling her stumbled, confused. She looked up again, this time at Euro. He flinched. "What are you?" he hissed. Still she said nothing, but something in the wind shifted. The trees leaned inward. The vines around her wrists began to twitch as if alive, pulsing slightly with each heartbeat. Euro barked orders. "Throw her in." Before the spirits changed their mind. But the others hesitated. Something in the air wasn't right. The river was no longer still. A ripple moved across its surface, slow and deliberate, like something breathing beneath. "She's just a girl," one man whispered. "We've gone too far." "No," Euro shouted. "She is the reason your crops rot. She is the reason your children cry. You think mercy will save us? Mercy is what cursed us." A scream tore through the night. One of the guards had stepped too close to the water and was yanked in, not by a hand, not by the girl, but by something unseen. His torch dropped, extinguished instantly. Panic broke. Some villagers ran. Others stood frozen. The vines around the girl's body began to unravel on their own, sliding away like snakes, hissing against the ground. Her feet were bare, yet the mud did not cling to her. She walked forward, not toward the river, but into the crowd. People parted before her, not by choice but by something older than fear. She passed Euro last. And only then did she speak. "You judged me by fear," she said, her voice soft but louder than thunder. "Now fear shall judge you." Then she was gone. Not into the river. Not into the forest. Simply gone. But the river? It began to rise. They waited until the moon was highest in the sky, when even the most curious children were asleep, when the animals were quiet, when even the wind seemed hesitant to move. Torches flickered in trembling hands, casting shadows that danced like ghosts along the mud walls of the village. The elders stood in a tight circle outside the shrine, whispering prayers too old for memory. The girl stood in the center, hands bound in front of her with sacred cloth dyed in river mud and ash. Her feet were bare. Her face expressionless. No one knew how she had been found again. She had vanished days ago, swallowed by forest or spirit, none could say, but this morning she had been sitting by the old drum tree, quiet as dawn, waiting. The hunter who saw her dropped his kill and ran to the elders, breath ragged with fear. And when they came to her with sticks and trembling commands, she didn't run. She only stood, lifting her arms as if to be carried. The chief had not wanted to hold another gathering. The last one had stirred something foul in the hearts of the villagers, something that still lingered in every cold glance, every sick child, every empty field. But Euro, the chief's advisor, insisted. "She's returned because we failed," he had whispered harshly. "We bound her with vine and fear, not faith. The gods need more. She needs to go to the river." And so they prepared the procession. They dressed in white cloths smeared with clay and ash. Women braided herbs into garlands and wrapped them around their necks. Men painted symbols on their foreheads and crushed charcoal. Drums were pulled from the shrine, tall ancient things with hides cracked from age. And from the moment the moon reached its peak, the drums began to beat. Boom, boom, boom. A slow, steady rhythm. A rhythm of mourning. A rhythm of warning. The village roused from its silence. People stepped out of their homes, drawn to the sound like insects to flame. They did not cheer. They did not cry. They stood quietly as the procession passed. First the drummers, then the elders, then the girl. She walked without resistance, her head held high, hair falling around her shoulders like a black veil. Her hands, though bound, never shook. Her lips did not part. Not to beg. Not to curse. Not to speak. Only Euro smiled. He walked just behind her, holding the sacred gourd that would be emptied into the river once the offering was complete. His eyes gleamed like a jackal that had tasted blood. As they walked, others joined. Some joined out of belief, others out of fear. But most joined because something in their bones told them not to look away. That this night would be remembered. That this girl, nameless and voiceless, carried something heavier than any had dared to name. They passed the old well where children had stopped playing weeks ago. Past the healer's hut, where herbs now dried and used. Past the granaries, half empty and swarmed with flies. Past the sacred tree, where the first drums had once been made. And finally they reached the river. It lay still and dark beneath the moonlight as if waiting. Mist hovered just above its surface, curling and moving in ways that wind did not control. No frogs croaked. No insects chirped. Even the air felt strange, heavy, damp, filled with a silence that tasted like teeth. The drummers formed a circle on the bank, continuing their slow rhythm. Elders stood behind them, murmuring prayers. The villagers crowded at the edge of the clearing, leaving a path for the girl and those who would carry out the rite. She was led to the water's edge. Euro stepped forward. He raised the gourd and poured a stream of white powder into the river. Ashes from the fire used to bless the sacred stone. The river hissed. Not loudly but enough to turn heads. Enough to make hearts pound harder. "This is not murder," Euro called out. "This is cleansing. The gods have spoken through our fields, through our children. We ignored them once. We shall not ignore them again." The villagers nodded, some muttering agreements. But many stared at the girl instead. She was still. So still. And when she turned to look at them, at all of them, her eyes reflected the moon. Euro stepped back. Let the sacred bearer of fate enter the water. The girl took a step forward. Then another. Each footfall into the shallows made no splash. The river parted for her skin like it knew her. Like it remembered. The drums stopped. All was silent. Euro hissed at the two guards to follow and make sure she submerged. But just as they reached her, she turned around. She did not struggle. She only lifted her chin as if to see the stars one last time. Her hair floated on the river's surface. The water reached her waist. Then her chest. Then she disappeared beneath. The guards turned back. One of them vomited into the bushes. The other just stared into the place where she had vanished, his mouth moving wordlessly. Euro exhaled loudly. It is done. The villagers stood there unmoving, waiting for something. Anything. Then slowly the river began to ripple. Not from current. Not from wind. But from something beneath. The ripples widened. The water churned. A shape rose from the center of the river, not the girl but something else. Something enormous. For a breath it looked like a face. Then a hand. Then a wave. And then the river exploded upward, a geyser of water shooting into the sky. People screamed. Children were pulled back. Drummers dropped their sticks. From the spray stepped the girl. Soaked but unshaken. Her hair clung to her skin like shadows. Her eyes glowed like the moon's own heart. Her bindings floated beside her, burned through as if by fire. She stood on the surface of the water. Euro backed away. This is not. The girl stepped forward. With every step, the river bowed beneath her feet. She looked at the villagers. Not with anger. Not with pain. But with knowing. She opened her mouth. And the wind howled. The mist thickened, swirling around the villagers. Some dropped to their knees. Others screamed and ran. But the ones who had held the ropes, the ones who had pushed her forward, the ones who had called her curse loudest, they could not move. The mist wrapped around them like hands. One by one they vanished. The river settled. The girl stepped onto the bank. Only silence greeted her. Only the stars dared witness what had happened. And then, without a word, she walked past the torches, past the drums, past the sacred tree, and back into the village that had once tried to drown her. No one dared stop her. No one dared speak. She went to the old well and sat beside it. And the next morning the crops turned green. The moment her body touched the river, silence fell. Not the kind of silence that comes from reverence or respect, but the heavy, paralyzing silence that creeps in when the world realizes it has made a terrible mistake. The villagers stood frozen, their hands still damp with the effort of pushing her forward, their chants cut short in their throats. The sacred river, always calm and winding, began to churn. Not like water agitated by wind, but like a creature disturbed in its sleep. The girl did not sink. The vines that bound her snapped one by one, not with the slow decay of rot, but with sharp, loud cracks like bones breaking in protest. She did not swim either. The river lifted her, raised her, as if hundreds of unseen hands cupped her gently beneath the surface and offered her back to the sky. Gasps spread through the crowd. She hovered just above the water's surface, her long dark hair slick with river light, her eyes still open and glowing with a soft blue shimmer. Then came the voice. Not hers. It was older than memory and deeper than thunder. It rolled from the forest, echoed through the stones, hummed in the roots of every tree. The villagers covered their ears but could not shut it out. It entered their bones. She is not yours to kill. Women screamed. Children hid behind their mothers' skirts. The chief dropped his staff and it rolled into the river, vanishing instantly beneath a sudden swell of water. The drums fell silent as the water surged and twisted. The river glowed now not just around the girl but across its entire width. An eerie golden blue light rippled upstream and down, stretching into the horizon, as though the river was remembering every wrong done along its banks. The girl turned slowly, no longer the helpless figure dragged from the village but something different. Taller somehow. Radiant. Her skin shimmered like the moonlight filtered through water, and when she stepped forward, the river moved with her. It didn't splash beneath her feet. It folded. Obeyed. The villagers stumbled back from the banks. The elders dropped to their knees. The chief's advisor, the very man who demanded her death, fell flat on his face, babbling about cleansing and curses and how he didn't know. But the girl said nothing. She simply looked at him. And in her eyes he saw every secret he'd buried, every lie whispered into the chief's ear, every deal made in the dark, every offering denied to the gods. The girl began to walk. Not back toward the village, but forward, across the river itself, which parted for her. Trees bowed along the edges of the bank. Fish leapt in silence, their scales catching the river's strange glow. Birds circled overhead but did not cry out. The world had turned its breath toward her. Then the thunder spoke again. She remembers. No one knew what that meant, not then. But in that moment many remembered. The oldest among them saw echoes of another girl, centuries ago, accused of bringing drought, cast into the same river. Of a woman in white robes, whose body was never found after she warned the chief about a betrayal. of mothers who whispered lullabies to daughters about water spirits and vengeance that sleeps with open eyes. The girl disappeared into the mist that rose from the river. Gone. Just as she had arrived. Without a word. Without a name. The villagers stood stunned, some still kneeling, others sobbing quietly. Then something strange happened. The water receded, not just to its normal state but further. It exposed stones long buried. Bones. Tools. A carved idol no one had seen in living memory. The river had remembered. And it had decided that silence was no longer its role. In the days that followed, nothing returned to normal. The crops did not revive. The children who had fallen ill remained weak. And yet, the village dared not speak her name, because no one knew it. They only referred to her in whispers. The girl the river returned. Some believed she had been a spirit all along. Others thought she was a test from the gods. But the oldest woman in the village, whose sight had failed but whose memory had not, muttered something that none could ignore. She was sent to witness. And the river does not forget a witness. Strange things happened after that. At night, the water glowed faintly. Not brightly, not always, but enough that you couldn't ignore it. Enough that those who had taken part in the procession dreamed of drowning hands and ancient faces. The chief no longer spoke in the village square. His advisor was found by the river, eyes wide open, mouth filled with reeds. No one mourned. The sacred grove, once used only for ceremony, bloomed with flowers never seen before. Blue petals shaped like open eyes. Children who had recovered began singing lullabies in a language they had never been taught. When asked who taught them, they would only say, "She sings to us when we sleep." And the river watched. Every stranger who passed through the village paused at its banks. Some claimed they saw a girl with no footprints walking on the surface. Some left offerings without knowing why. And one, a traveling priest, tried to declare the land cursed. He vanished the next morning. All that remained was a puddle on the temple floor and a faint scent of wet earth. Years passed. The girl became a story. Then a legend. Then a truth carved into stone. The riverbank where she had been cast was renamed, the Return Shore. No one was allowed to walk there after sunset. A shrine was built, not in her image for none dared sculpt her, but in honor of the one who was not drowned. And still the river glowed. Some say it waits. Some say it judges. Some say she returns in storms, watching, listening, remembering every injustice, every cry ignored, every judgment passed out of fear and not truth. But none dare test it again. Because in that village and in the villages beyond, people now whisper a different prayer before sleep. May the river not remember my name. And sometimes when the night is quiet and the moon is full, a soft humming can be heard near the water. The same lullaby the girl never sang aloud. But one that was never truly forgotten. Even by the river. The sky had barely swallowed the last echo of thunder when the girl stepped once more onto the village soil. Her dress, soaked and clinging to her skin, dripped river water that shimmered like glass. No one moved. Not the drummers whose hands still hovered above their drums, not the mothers who had come to see a curse drowned, nor the elders who had nodded when the advisor made his final judgment. Silence spread wider than the floodplain. And there she was, alive, not gasping, not broken, just walking, water trailing behind her like a veil. Her feet touched the same earth that had condemned her, but the ground did not recoil. Her head held high, she moved slowly, not with vengeance, but with something heavier, truth. The girl's eyes scanned the faces that had gathered just hours earlier to sacrifice her. The healer who had smeared ashes on her forehead, the teacher who had taught the children to avoid her shadow, the chief who had not met her gaze when he gave his reluctant nod. She reached the village square. And then, for the first time, her voice broke the silence. You feared what you never tried to understand. The words dropped like stones. Spoken softly, but each syllable rang like a bell. The villagers flinched. The chief's wife gasped. A child began to cry. No one moved toward her. No one offered warmth or apology, only stunned faces and wide, frightened eyes. The river listened, she said. Why didn't you? Her voice wasn't angry, but it bore the weight of betrayal. A betrayal deeper than the river that had refused to claim her. A betrayal rooted in ignorance, in old myths used to silence and isolate. The advisor, the one who had first called for her death, tried to step forward. He opened his mouth, but the girl raised a hand. Not to curse, not to strike, but to still him. No words, she said. You spoke enough when I could not. She turned to the children who peeked from behind their mother's skirts. Some looked frightened, others curious. She lowered herself to the ground, letting her wet robes pool around her like a second river. From her pocket, she drew a small carved stone. It was not shaped like anything recognizable, just a smooth pebble, but it glowed faintly with the same light the river had shown. She handed it to the smallest child, a girl who had once offered her a plum in secret. "Hold this when you are afraid," she whispered. "Not all that is unknown wishes to harm you." The girl took the stone with trembling fingers. Around her whispers began, low, uneasy. Is she a spirit? A witch? A messenger of the gods? But none dared say it aloud. The drummers had stopped beating. The sky had cleared. The wind, so loud before, had vanished. And she stood again, this girl with no name, no past, and now, no place among them. "Keep your village," she said. "I will take the truth." With that she walked past them. No one stopped her. No one could. The vines that had bound her still lay wilted by the riverbank. The boat that was meant to carry her body downstream sat untouched. And the water had receded, calm now, as if the storm had never happened. But the village would not forget. They watched her walk, her soaked feet leaving no mud behind. She did not look back. She passed the shrine, where elders now dared not pray. She passed the healer's hut, the fields with dead crops, the fences where once curious children had tried to call her a sister. She walked past all of it without a flinch. And as she did, a strange thing began to happen. One by one mirrors cracked in their frames. The chief's mirror, a wedding gift, shattered as he raised a cup to his lips. The advisor's bowl of wine soured before he drank it. The village's sacred drum, carved from a tree older than the chief himself, split down the middle. And in the center of the square, where she had once sat in silence while they debated her fate, the stone beneath their feet pulsed once. A single breath, as if the land had been holding it in. For years to come, they would say the river had judged them. Some left the village within days. Some stayed hoping to forget. But the memory remained. And for those who had truly seen her, not just the wet girl who walked back from death, but the voice that echoed justice, they would tell her story differently. They would not call her a witch, or a curse, or a nameless girl. They would say quietly and humbly, she was the one the river knew. And they would teach their children not to fear what the wind could not carry away. That year the rains came late. When they arrived, they fell with a choking force as if the sky itself was weeping over the land, not to nourish but to mourn. Thunder no longer rolled with drama, it cracked like a whip across the heavens. The earth soaked it in hungrily, but something was different. The seeds the villagers planted did not rise. Not one stalk of maize broke the surface. Not a single yam blossomed underground. The soil remained hollow. And though no one said it out loud, each hoe that struck the dirt did so with a hidden plea, a silent apology that no one dared to voice aloud. It began slowly. A dream here, a nightmare there. At first, the people dismissed them. Who didn't have strange dreams when their bellies were half empty and their minds heavy with regret? But the dreams deepened. They sharpened. They bled into each other. One night, the blacksmith awoke screaming that a river of eyes had surrounded his bed. Another night, a mother woke to find her baby staring fixedly at the wall, giggling, though there was nothing there. Or at least nothing visible. The chief, once proud and immovable, found his bed wet with sweat every morning, his heart pounding with images of a soaked girl standing at the edge of his dreams. She did not speak. She only stared. And behind her, towering spirits made of mist and moonlight stood in silence, their faces featureless but full of judgment. The same river that had refused to take her now crept through his sleep like a serpent, whispering without words. His hands, once steady with leadership, began to tremble. By the third week, the healer's hut was filled not with the sick, but with the sleepless. Eyes ringed with shadow, children who woke screaming, elders who muttered prayers under their breath, afraid to close their eyes. The healer herself confessed one morning that her hands had turned cold in her dreams, blue, lifeless, as if the spirits had drained the warmth from her. The dreams always ended the same way, the village sinking. Not in water but in shame. Animals grew restless. Goats broke through their pens and ran into the woods, never to return. Chickens refused to lay. Even the dogs, once loyal companions, now howled at night as though mourning something only they could sense. Fires would not stay lit. Wells tasted of rust. The market, once full of chatter and trade, now echoed with silence. No one laughed. And the river no one dared approach, had grown clearer. Too clear. It reflected not just the sky, but the faces of those who came near it, twisted in ways they did not recognize. Rumors took root, poisonous and fast-growing. "This is her revenge," said some. "No," others whispered, "this is the spirit's answer." Not hers. Still others dared to say nothing, but left small offerings at the edge of the river, groundnuts, folded cloth, beads, even tears. The spirits did not speak back. But the wind grew sharper, more discerning, as though it could slice through lies. Some heard voices riding its currents, low murmurs that tickled the ear then vanished. One woman claimed she heard the wind say, "You judged. Now be judged." One night, the advisor, the very man who had first called for the girl's death, was found wandering the paths outside the village, muttering to himself. His hands were covered in scratches as if branches had tried to stop him. When the chief's guards brought him back, he collapsed at the square's center and wailed like a child. He pointed toward the woods and shouted, "They wait there. The drowned ones. The forgotten ones. They wear our names like masks." He was locked inside his own hut. But no door could shut out what plagued him. By morning he was gone. Not a single track, not a broken lock. Only his walking stick left upright outside, balanced unnaturally in the dirt, the sign of a spirit's claim. It was then that the elders gathered. This time not in pride or power but in desperation. They sat in a circle, their robes damp with the night's dew, their faces pale. The chief did not speak first. Instead, it was the youngest elder, the one who had always questioned but never voted. "We cursed ourselves," he said. "Not her. We chose cruelty over compassion." "Then what do we do?" asked the chief's wife, her voice brittle. "Undo what we can," the young elder said. "Begin with truth." The old drum, once split, was left in the square. On it, they placed symbols of the girl's presence. The cloth she had worn, the necklace someone had snatched from her that day, a small pot of the very river water that had returned her. Then the confessions began. One by one they stepped forward. The teacher who had told the children to avoid her. The man who had tied the vines around her wrists. The woman who had told her she should have never been born. All came forward and spoke their shame aloud. Not all confessed. Some refused. Some watched with tight jaws and folded arms. But the ones who did, those who wept and broke and begged the air to listen, found strangely their dreams less sharp that night. Still the curses lingered. No crops. No sleep. No songbirds in the morning. The girl had not returned. Nor had the spirits spoken in any language they could understand. But they were there, watching, reminding. The people felt them in the pause before a whisper, in the sudden shiver of skin during midday heat, in the way reflection sometimes blinked out of rhythm. Then one dawn a child went missing. The same girl who had once received the glowing stone from the soaked girl's hand. Her mother screamed through the village, pulling at her hair, throwing curses into the wind. Search parties formed, torches raised high, but the forest answered with silence. No tracks. No broken branches. Only stillness, thick as grief. By the second night they found her. She was standing at the riverbank, barefoot, calm. In her hand was the glowing stone. "She's been here," the child said, looking toward the trees. The girl. But not angry. Just watching. The spirits sang to her. I heard them. They brought the child home, untouched, unafraid. She slept peacefully that night, the only one who did. The next morning, flowers bloomed by the river. Wild, radiant, and unlike any the villagers had seen. Birds gathered on branches near the water. And when one boy tossed a seed into the soil, not to farm but as an offering, it sprouted within an hour. The elders returned to the river. Not with torches or fear this time. But with drums, with clean robes, with bowed heads. They offered songs. Not prayers for mercy but songs of truth. They chanted not the name of the spirits but of the girl, the one who walked back wet and changed the wind forever. And though she never returned, not in flesh, they began to speak of her differently. She was not the cursed. She was the returned. The spared. The seen. And the spirits, in their silent, sweeping way, began to ease their grip. Nightmares became gentler. Wells cleared. Goats returned in small herds as if guided. The people of the village, now cautious with their words and kinder with their eyes, rebuilt slowly. But they never forgot. They built a small shrine by the river, not to worship, but to remember. Not out of fear but respect. And in the center of that shrine sat the stone, still glowing, still warm, the same stone the girl had given the child. Visitors who passed through would ask who the girl was. Some would say she was the river's daughter. Others would say she was the voice of those we silenced. The chief's hut, once a place of pride and celebration, had turned cold and silent. Inside, his only daughter, Lela, lay motionless on a mat of woven palm leaves. Her skin was pale, her lips cracked, and her breath shallow. She had not spoken in days, and every healer, herbalist, and spiritual guide brought to her side left shaking their heads. No medicine soothed her, no chant revived her. The chief sat by her side day and night, his face hollowed by grief, his eyes refusing to blink for fear that her final breath might slip away unnoticed. Outside, the village stirred in anxious whispers. The same mouths that once accused the silent girl of curses and evil now trembled in confusion. Ever since the girl had emerged from the river, not drowned, not broken, but standing tall with her wet hair clinging to her like a warning, nothing in the village had felt right. The rains did not fall. The wind howled through the trees even on warm days. Chickens laid no eggs. Goats birthed stillborn young. And now, the beloved daughter of the chief lay on the edge of death. It felt like punishment, but no one dared say it aloud. The girl, who still had no name, lived in a small hut at the edge of the village now. Built by her own hands from fallen branches and river reeds, it stood like a defiance of the place that had tried to drown her. She spoke rarely, and no one visited her except for a few children who were too young to carry hatred in their hearts. But even they came less and less, their parents wary of her presence. On the 5th night of Lela's sickness, as the moon cast a silver sheen over the land, the chief stood in the center of the village. He was not a man known to bow to fear, but tonight his voice trembled like leaves in wind. If there is a soul in this village, or beyond, who can help my daughter, I will give anything. His words were not met with cheers or prayers, only silence. Then from the edge of the shadows the silent girl stepped forward. The firelight revealed her face, unreadable yet calm. Her dress was damp at the hem as if the river still clung to her. I can help, she said. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one had heard her voice since the river returned her. Some villagers stepped back, others tightened their fists in suspicion. The chief stared at her, unsure whether to believe or banish her again. She stood tall. Not with herbs. Not with spells. But with truth. If you wish to save your daughter, you must listen. The chief clenched his jaw. You speak of truth? After what the village believes of you. I speak of what you refuse to see, she replied. You fear what you do not understand. But the river knows me. It spared me. And now your daughter's life depends not on my power, but your ability to hear what has long been ignored. The chief hesitated. His pride battled the weight of his daughter's dying breaths. Around him villagers murmured. Some begged him to refuse her. Others, softened by fear and helplessness, urged him to try anything. Finally he raised a hand for silence. Tell me, he said. What must I do? The girl looked up at the stars. She is not sick from the body, but from the spirit. The village's cruelty, your silence in its face, and the injustice left unanswered have unbalanced the sacred harmony. The river spirits cannot be ignored. The spirits are angry, she continued, her voice quiet but firm. Not at me. At you. You who dragged an innocent into the river. You who called storms upon yourselves. Your daughter's illness is not a curse from me, it is a wound made by your own hands. You bled the land with fear. The chief's face fell as if each word struck his chest like a drumbeat. Then, what must I do? You must listen, she said again. You must admit what was done. You must speak truth before all. And you must ask for forgiveness, not from me, but from the river, the sky, the land, and from every soul that watched in silence when I was bound. A heavy silence settled. No one dared speak. Then, as if pulled by unseen threads, the chief sank to his knees. Before her. Before the one the village had tried to destroy. I was wrong, he whispered. We were all wrong. That night, the chief called the entire village to gather. Fires were lit in every corner. Drums remained silent, not in celebration but reverence. The silent girl stood beside him, not as a prisoner, not as a threat, but as a witness. And the chief, with his voice steady and raw, confessed. He spoke of the fear that overtook wisdom, of the evil done under the name of tradition, of how they mistook difference for danger. He named his advisor who had convinced them all. He named his own silence. And then he asked, for the first time in his life, for mercy. As his words faded, the wind shifted. A soft breeze curled through the village. Somewhere beyond, the river gurgled louder than before. Then in the chief's hut a cry rang out. Not a cry of pain but of breath. Of awakening. Lela was sitting up. Her eyes wide, her lips parted in surprise. The dream, she whispered to the healer beside her. The river was singing. And the girl, she held my hand. By dawn the village was changed. Not fully healed but cracked open. The chief's pride had bowed, and the girl who once had no name now held every eye with quiet strength. Children returned to her hut that morning not to stare, but to sit beside her. And though she never asked for a name, the villagers began to call her something soft and new, Nyoka, the one the river returned. But the curse had not lifted completely. The spirits still waited. For full justice. For memory not to fade. And for truth to live in the voices of every villager, passed down so no one forgot that fear, when left unchallenged, can grow sharper than any blade. The chief's hut stood in silence, lit only by the flickering shadows of a dying fire. His daughter lay pale, sweat glistening on her forehead, breath shallow. None of the herbs from the medicine woman had worked. No chant, no potion, no prayer brought her peace. Each night her cries grew weaker. Desperation clung to the walls of the hut like smoke. Outside, the village teetered between shame and fear. They had cast a child into a river to die, and she had returned, alive, dry-eyed, and damning in her silence. She had asked for nothing, yet her presence uncoiled their guilt like vines around the heart. They had mocked her, feared her, condemned her, and yet now she was their only hope. The chief bowed his head over his daughter, eyes swollen from sleepless nights. Pride had built his reputation, shaped his decisions, held him strong in the eyes of his people. But pride could not hold back death. And death was near. A rustling at the door startled him. The silent girl stood there, still dressed in the same torn wrap she wore the day she was thrown to the river. Her hair was wet again though it hadn't rained. Water dripped from her fingertips. Her feet left no prints on the floor. Without a word she walked into the hut. The guards didn't stop her. The chief didn't speak. She knelt beside the dying girl, pulling a gourd from her side, water sloshing softly inside. She uncorked it and poured a few drops onto the girl's lips. A shiver passed through the girl's body. Then another. Her chest rose, stronger. Her color returned, faint but visible. She sighed, the way people do when they finally fall into a peaceful sleep. The fever broke. The chief fell to his knees, eyes wet. "Who are you?" he whispered. The girl stood. For the second time in all the moons she'd lived among them, she spoke. "I was sent," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the space like wind fills a sail. "Not to destroy. Not to punish. But to see. To test your hearts." The chief lowered his head. Around the hut, villagers began to gather, drawn by the fading cries of the chief's daughter and the wordless call that seemed to pulse through the earth itself. "You feared me because you did not understand me," she continued. "And because fear rules this village more than wisdom. You let whispers become weapons. You chose judgment over compassion. And when you cast me into the river, you sealed your shame." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some looked away. Some wept. Some dropped to their knees, the weight of their guilt too heavy to stand under. "The river refused me because I was never yours to destroy. I belonged to something older, wiser, deeper. And it watched you." She stepped away from the sleeping girl and faced the crowd. "The sickness that took your crops. The spirits in your dreams. The curse that clings to your land, they were not mine to give. They were yours to summon." Silence fell. "But not all is lost," she said. "The river is merciful. The spirits wait. Repent, not with words but with actions. Care for the weak. Protect the strange. Speak truth even when it costs you. Only then will the land breathe again." With that, she turned and walked away back toward the river. The villagers didn't follow. They watched, hearts heavy. The lesson was not in her power. It was in their failure. And now, in their chance to begin again.